Most people who delay retirement by 1 year run the same numbers. Save an extra $40,000. Skip 1 year of drawing down $60,000. That's a $100,000 swing on paper. Clean, simple, hard to argue with. So they don't argue. They go back to work. And here's the part nobody says out loud: that math is not wrong. It's just incomplete. Because your spreadsheet has no column for the years your knees still work. No row for the summer your grandkids are young enough to want you around. No formula that tells you how many of those summers you actually have left. You're optimizing a number. But the number isn't the whole picture. Now, there's something else most of these retirement calculators miss entirely. A law change that went fully into effect in 2026. And it rewrites the 1 more year math in a way that depends almost entirely on how old you are right now. If you're between 60 and 63, this changes everything. If you're outside that window, working 1 more year may cost you more than you think. Subscribe if you want to see the full picture, because we're going to do the real math. David and Sarah are both 61. They have $800,000 sitting in their 401k. They've done the planning. They know they want to spend around $60,000 a year in retirement. By most measures, they're in good shape. But David isn't ready to pull the plug. He ran a stress test. He looked at the Monte Carlo projections. And the line that gave him the most confidence wasn't the probability percentage at the bottom. It was the one that shot straight up on the chart. I've sat in front of that same screen. I know that feeling. The only thing that made the fear manageable was watching the asset line climb. Clicking retire now felt like jumping off something. So I understand why David does what David does. He says, the world is unstable right now. What if inflation comes back 1 more year, just to be safe? And here's the mechanism behind that instinct. Working 1 more year doesn't just add money. It runs 2 engines at the same time. Engine 1, David contributes another $40,000 to the account. Engine 2, the existing $800,000 keeps compounding at roughly 6% without being touched. That's another $48,000 in growth. Add both together, and David starts retirement almost $90,000 ahead of where he would have been. Every financial planning software on the market will tell David to keep going. The math supports it. But there's a loop hiding inside that math. Next year, David will have a slightly larger balance. The market will still feel uncertain. Inflation will still be a headline somewhere. And he will have exactly the same reason to say 1 more year. Then again the year after that. This is what the research calls 1 more year syndrome. It's not laziness. It's not greed. It's what happens when a system is designed to always make you feel like you're not quite there yet. The goalposts move because the model rewards accumulation and penalizes the moment you stop. You worked hard. You saved. You did everything right. The system just wasn't built to tell you when to stop. It was built to keep you going. But look at the other side of this coin. Because the spreadsheet that convinced David to stay is the same spreadsheet that's quietly ignoring something much harder to quantify. Sarah doesn't run spreadsheets. She thinks in people. She remembers John, their neighbor, 62 years old, retired early, spent his last summer doing exactly what he always said he would. He died 8 months later. Nobody saw it coming. So while David is staring at the Monte Carlo chart, Sarah says something that cuts through all of it. What if we get sick next year? What if we wait too long? That's not an irrational fear. That's a different kind of math. Here's what the actuarial data from the Social Security Administration actually shows. If you're a healthy 61-year-old couple today, there's a real probability one of you lives into your late 80s, maybe beyond. So yes, longevity is a real financial risk. Running out of money is a genuine possibility, and no one should pretend otherwise. But here's the number nobody puts in the retirement brochure. The years between roughly 65 and 75 are statistically your most active. Researchers call them the go-go years. After that comes the slow-go years, then the no-go years. The biology moves in one direction, and it doesn't ask for your opinion. David and Sarah are 61. If the go-go window closes around 73 or 74, they have roughly 10 to 12 summers left where they can hike, travel, lift their grandkids off the ground without thinking twice about it. Every year they delay is not a neutral decision. It's a trade. They are exchanging one of those summers for a few more percentage points of buffer in a spreadsheet. One summer out of maybe 10. That's 10% of their healthy time, traded for roughly 5% more margin on a balance sheet. That's not a good deal, even if the Excel file says it is. I've been close enough to this decision for enough people to know how it tends to go. The ones who waited too long don't regret the money. They regret the trip they kept postponing. The summer they said next year. The grandkid who stopped asking. Now, a lot of channels will tell you to just retire because life is short. That's not what I'm saying. Because sometimes working one more year isn't just an emotional mistake. It's also a financial one. And the reason has nothing to do with the stock market. There's a hidden cost sitting in the background of David's plan, one that his stress test almost certainly didn't account for. And once you see the number, the one more year for safety logic starts to fall apart in a very specific way. Let's say David's fear is legitimate. Let's take it seriously for a moment. He's worried about inflation coming back, about a bad sequence of returns early in retirement, about the market dropping 30% in year one and never fully recovering before he needs the money. These are real risks. They show up in the research. They're worth planning around. But here's what David's stress test almost certainly didn't model. The single largest financial threat to an American retirement isn't a market crash. It's the cost of getting old in a country where care is expensive. According to Genworth's 2026 Cost of Care report, a private room in a nursing home now runs somewhere between $115,000 and $120,000 per year. Not a worst-case outlier, an average. And that number has been climbing faster than general inflation for the better part of 2 decades. Now run that against David's plan. He's working one more year to add roughly $40,000 to his retirement account. That's his safety margin, his buffer against uncertainty. But a single year in a nursing home costs 3 times that amount. One health event, one fall, one diagnosis that changes the trajectory, and the entire one more year calculation evaporates in less than 12 months. This is the gap in the logic that almost nobody talks about. People are grinding out extra years at a job, trading their healthiest time to self-insure against a risk that their working income can't actually cover. The math doesn't close. It never did. And here's the part that makes it worse. The people most likely to work extra years for safety are often the same people skipping long-term care planning entirely because they assume the extra savings will handle it. It won't. $40,000 a year in additional contributions is not a long-term care strategy. It's a feeling of control dressed up as a plan. I've watched this happen more times than I can count. Someone spends 3 extra years at a job they've outgrown, telling themselves they're being responsible, being prudent, protecting their family. And the variable they never priced in ends up being the one that undoes it. So if the fear of running out of money is real, but trading time for a false sense of security is also a trap, where does that leave you? The answer isn't emotional, it's structural. And it starts with a law change that most people in this age group have completely missed. Let's go back to David. He's 61 years old. He's been sitting on the fence about retirement for the better part of a year. And up until this point, everything we've said has been working against his instinct to stay. The hidden clock, the go-go years, the long-term care math that doesn't close. But here's where it gets interesting. Because David's decision to work one more year isn't wrong. It's just that almost nobody has told him why it's right for the right reason. In 2026, a provision inside the Secure 2.0 Act went into full effect. Most people have heard of catch-up contributions. If you're 50 or older, you're allowed to contribute more to your 401k than the standard limit. For 2026, the base 401k limit sits at $23,500. The standard catch-up for people 50 and older adds $7,500 on top of that. That's been around for years. Nothing new there. But buried inside Secure 2.0 is something most financial media hasn't explained clearly. If you are exactly 60, 61, 62, or 63 years old, you qualify for what the law calls the super catch-up. Instead of the standard $7,500 catch-up, your limit jumps to the greater of $10,000 or 150% of the regular catch-up amount. For 2026, that works out to roughly $11,250 or more, depending on how the IRS indexes it. That means someone in the 60-63 window can potentially put away close to $34,750 into their 401k in a single year pre-tax. Think about what that means in practice. Every dollar that goes into a traditional 401k is a dollar that doesn't get taxed this year. If David is in the 22% or 24% federal bracket, maximizing the super catch-up saves him somewhere between $2,500 and $2,700 in federal taxes alone, just from the additional contribution above the standard catch-up. That's before state taxes. That's before the compounding effect on those dollars inside the account. Before 2025, I would have told clients not to let small contribution differences drive a major life decision. I believed that then. But when Secure 2.0 fully activated the super catch-up this year, I went back through the files of every client I had between 60 and 63 and rebuilt their scenarios from scratch. The math had changed enough that the advice had to change with it. Now here's the edge that most people miss entirely. This window is narrow. If David is 59, he doesn't qualify yet. If he's 64, the super catch-up drops back to the standard rate. The leverage exists only inside a 4-year window, and it only works if you're still employed and contributing. Which means for David, at 61, working one more year isn't just emotionally defensible. It is a genuine system exploit, a legal, government-sanctioned mechanism to compress years of tax-advantaged savings into the exact window where the rules favor you most. If David were 64, the calculation flips entirely. He'd be trading a summer of his go-go years for a contribution limit that gives him no special advantage. That's when working one more year becomes a bad deal. But at 61, it's one of the most efficient financial moves available to him under current law. This is the part that almost no one explains. One more year gets treated like a universal truth, something either always smart or always a trap, depending on which YouTube channel you're watching. But it's neither. It's a strategy with a very specific expiration date. And if you're in the 60-63 window right now, the clock is running in your favor, not against you. If you know someone in that age range who's on the fence about retirement, share this video with them. They may be sitting on a tax advantage worth thousands of dollars, and have no idea it exists. Once you understand how this mechanism works, the real question becomes how to structure everything around it so that when you do stop working, you stop with confidence. That's what we're going to look at next. Knowing the mechanism is one thing, but knowing the mechanisms doesn't make it easier to press the button. So let's talk about what actually removes the fear, because it's not more years at a job. It's structure. The reason most people feel like they need one more year isn't that they don't have enough money. It's that their money is sitting in one undifferentiated pile, and they have no clear answer for what happens if the market drops 30% in year one of retirement, and they still need to pay the mortgage and the grocery bill and the health insurance premium. That gap between the money they have and the plan they trust is what keeps people in offices they've already mentally left. The tool that closes that gap is called the bucket strategy. The idea is straightforward. You divide your assets into separate buckets based on when you'll need them, and you match the risk level of each bucket to its time horizon. Bucket 1 is cash and short-term instruments, CDs, T-bills, money market accounts. You put 2 to 3 years of living expenses in here. At current Fed rates in 2026, short-term instruments are still returning something meaningful. So this money isn't just sitting idle. It's working, just quietly. This is the bucket you spend from in retirement, regardless of what the market is doing. Bucket 2 is your medium-term holdings, bonds, dividend-paying stocks, more conservative allocations. This is what you draw down once. Bucket 1 is depleted, typically over years 3 through 7 or 8 of retirement. Bucket 3 is your long-term growth assets, your index funds, your equity exposure. This bucket has time. If the market drops hard in year 1, you don't touch it. You spend from bucket 1 while bucket 3 recovers. That's the whole mechanism. You're not selling equities at the bottom because you don't need to. Now layer the Secure 2.0 Super Catch up on top of this. If you're 60 to 63 and still working, this year is the time to maximize that contribution and direct as much as possible into your long-term bucket inside the tax shelter. You're building the foundation of bucket 3 while the tax code is handing you an unusually wide door to do it through. And one more number that people in this age group often overlook. If you're planning to retire before 65, you have a gap in health coverage before Medicare kicks in. ACA marketplace plans are available, but the premiums depend heavily on your income in retirement. If you manage your withdrawals carefully, particularly in the early years, you may qualify for subsidies that significantly reduce that cost. This is worth modeling before you make the final call, because a $1,200 monthly premium versus a $300 monthly premium is a $10,800 annual difference that changes your withdrawal math entirely. The point isn't to hand you a checklist. The point is that the decision to retire doesn't have to rest on the emotional weight of one more year. It can rest on a structure that holds up when the market doesn't cooperate, when an unexpected bill shows up, when the world feels uncertain, which it always will. You don't need a perfect forecast. You need a system designed to absorb imperfection. David and Sarah made their decision. David works one more year, not because he's scared, not because the spreadsheet told him to, because he's 61 and 2026 is the year he maximizes the super catch-up, compresses as much as possible into the tax shelter, and builds out bucket 1 with the salary he still has coming in. Then he stops. Clean, deliberate. With a structure that doesn't depend on the market cooperating in year 1. They've counted the summers. They know what they're spending them on. This morning I was going through comments on the channel with a cold cup of coffee. the kind you forget about and then drink anyway. And someone had written something that stuck with me. Wealth isn't just numbers. It's being there for the people who show up when it's hard. I don't think I could say it better than that. Don't let the system hold you longer than it needs to. If you're in the 60-63 window, you have a real, legal, time-limited advantage sitting in the tax code right now. If you're outside that window, the decision still comes down to structure over sentiment. Subscribe to Wes Investor if you want to keep thinking through this stuff clearly. And leave a comment below. Are you in the 60-63 window and still figuring out how to use it? Or have you already decided it's time to take back your summers? I'd genuinely like to know. See you in the next one.